Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight and welcome to this week's CCL training program. We offer weekly webinars for CCL supporters like you and I on topics related to climate change and effective climate advocacy. I'm your host, Brett Cease, and tonight we're going to jump into reviewing summer tabling opportunities for you as volunteers. Members of your community are out and about in the summertime attending fairs, festivals, art walks, and other outdoor events. So let's plan to use our clean energy permitting reform flyers and other materials to engage and activate event attendees for a presentation that will help you and your team identify, reserve, and schedule summer tabling and clipboarding, knowing what resources to utilize and other materials to the events, as well as a review of how to educate, activate, engage, and recruit the people you meet about climate action with CCL. And if we've done our job well tonight, we will have helped you understand why tabling is an important outreach opportunity for each of our chapters to engage in our communities with. We'll help highlight the basics behind how to best prepare for your tabling event, especially with CCL's new materials. And we'll review key recommendations and ideas on how to engage passerbys to act on climate change. So our agenda is really straightforward. We're going to ask why tabling, how to prepare, and how to connect. And we'll make sure to stay on for plenty of Q&A discussion. So let's start with this essential question. Why table? Well, there's a variety of reasons. For education and action purposes, tabling helps to educate people in your community about climate issues and solutions to the problems you seek to solve. Talking to people helps to normalize the topic of climate change in discussions in our communities. While tabling, you can also encourage them to find like-minded individuals, to stay connected, and to realize that taking action is often easier than they realize in engaging Congress. You can also invite them to your local chapter, the next upcoming social or outreach event you're doing, and to volunteer with you to join your group. We also table for inclusion and networking purposes. If we are willing to move out of our comfort zone, tabling can help us increase our diversity locally, and we want you to look for events in your area and beyond if you're able, with audiences that are likely to include people of color, conservatives, young people, youth. Some examples outside of your traditional farmers market might be anything from community or ethnic festivals, Juneteenth events, health fairs, hunting and fishing events, garden or home expos, library-sponsored events, or any of the other community-affiliated groups that you might be able to look up and are active in your area. At tabling events, you can find yourself near other organizations or businesses also tabling. The wonderful Debbie Chang has put a great forum post together on what this is known as guerrilla reverse tabling. It can be done with a couple of volunteers or your overall group. What you want to do is basically load up your volunteers with a small stack of quarter-page flyers, business cards about CCL, share the goal with your volunteers to talk with a couple of vendors or community members each, and just take the time to enjoy themselves and have fun at the event. What are some organic ways that you can bring up climate change or climate advocacy in the conversation? And use word of mouth to plant seeds, getting your name out there locally, building familiarity with CCL's organization in your community. You want to end conversations by inviting them if they're interested to learn more or join your chapter. If appropriate or they seem interested, it may be okay to ask for a card of theirs so you can follow up later afterwards, or to share your own card or flyer if they'd like to use that to contact you and leave the ball in their court. At this point, know that this can be done at any tabling or community event, whether you're an attendee or a vendor, and that people have had success. So if you're interested, you can just look up guerrilla reverse tabling and join Debbie's forum thread for more discussion. So be curious, learn about other groups, and maybe you can build some new connections and relationships for future work that you might be up to. Let's review how to prepare your tabling opportunity. Here's a couple of checklist items. First, let's consider logistics. Someone will contact the host organization to determine how to register for tabling at their event. If you're tabling in a public space like a park rather than an event inside, you might also want to check out local laws first. If you're tabling at a formal event, then you can ask the event organizers for details about your booth, such as how much space will you have? Will they provide tables and chairs? Will the space be inside or outside? Will their outside space automatically come with a cover or a tent canopy? Do they provide access to power or internet? When do you need to arrive to set up? When can you start cleaning up? And do they require insurance? If they do require an insurance, we'll put a link to this in the chat. And if you're listening at home, you can just search CCL Community for proof of insurance for a form that we have available for anyone in need. And I would say 9 times, if not more out of 10, you do not need to worry about that dimension, but it's there for you if they mention they need it. Build your team. Next, let's consider how to build your tabling team. We know that lobbying is a team sport, and so is tabling, as you can see here in this photo. One person alone can do all of the tasks, but a team of many makes light the work. So, like I described, in my first tabling events for CCL, I did all of these tasks myself. It was exhausting, but at that point, I was a chapter of one. So sometimes that's how it is. We get it. If you do have more folks who can help, then divide up the responsibilities by having somebody perhaps coordinate the event. They can serve as the point of contact with the event organizer and field questions that your team has. They can also create the schedule for the volunteers tabling. We recommend teams of 2 for 2-hour shifts each. That way everyone gets a breather. If the event includes children and families, add a third tabler for each shift who can really engage the children separately and have activities for them so that parents can more easily focus on learning with the rest of you. Have 1 or 2 volunteers ready to arrive early and another set of volunteers ready to stay late and collect those materials afterwards, especially if they're the ones that ended up storing them often. Be sure to always have somebody taking photos so that you can also use your opportunity to post on social media afterwards. And always have a team ready to follow up with any potential volunteers you meet while tabling. It's really important to have that planned out ahead of time because follow-up is best done in that very next day when the potential volunteers have you fresh in mind and in their memory. So having that lined up ahead of time is essential. You also want to think ahead of time about what your focus is going to be. Do you want to ask people to take a specific climate action program ask that we generate once a month, like calling or writing Congress on a particular bill or issue to support? Are you hoping to grow your chapter to engage people to volunteer with your local group? Do you want to reach out to a certain demographic that you would like to make sure to grow the voice and presence of in your chapter? A particular political leaning, a certain age group? What areas of diversity are important for you to make sure to well-round into? Or are you also just wanting to educate and engage the public on the issue of climate change to help highlight how important and widespread it is? If that's the case, let's think through some of the basic supplies that you can gather. Here's a brief list, but know that this is not exhaustive. There's plenty of other opportunities that we'll highlight here after this. First, I want to point out that the simplest form of tabling is actually clipboarding. You probably have already maybe done this in other settings in your own life. You put everything you need on a clipboard and then you walk around the event or the park or in front of the store, engaging people that pass by. On that clipboard or your table, depending on what you have as a focus, you probably will want a sign-up sheet, some Spanish language resources, an action sheet, somewhere to send people to learn more about your organization. And you can put all of this on your clipboard to make it easy to folks who drop by your table if they're there to sign up. That way they don't have to lean down on your table. You want to have plenty of pens, especially if people are going to be writing anything. And you want to wear a name tag or have your CCL button or sticker on so you look more official and inviting. Here's 2 pro tips. If you have an event that allows you to have internet, go to cclusa.org/join and have the join page already entered on your computer there. That way passerbys can automatically join CCL digitally right there at your table and you don't have to do any extra paperwork later. Or if you don't have access to internet, you can always have your sign-up sheet and fill out the complete first row before anyone else shows up. That way you can model adding your address and phone number, and it's an important way for other people to be able to highlight that it's okay and comfortable for them to share that information for you to enter later in your database. Remember that all local contacts now, if you use the sign-up sheet, are up to you to enter in afterwards. All right, so let's think about some creative engagement opportunities. A couple of things here that we'll highlight that you could be creative with your setup. You can bring a fun game into a learning exercise. We've seen Jenga blocks with questions on them, or a Velcro dartboard, or a spinner wheel that you can land on a number that relates to a question or a prize. You could bring your electric car or a small solar power charging for your cell phone, you name it. You could also include coloring books or some activity that you can have children do while you're engaging their parents and talking. Print off those color pages and then bring a beanbag toss or some other small sand box with tiny toys in it for them to be able to engage and have a family-friendly atmosphere. A couple of the other things you see here on this slide include our wonderful Yale Climate 6 Americas study, where people can put a pin or in a jar, place a stone closest to the area of the 6 Americas that they closely align with, from alarmed all the way down to dismissive. We also have wonderful marker boards that say, "Dear Congress," and then invite you to write a message and have a photo booth for them to send on social media afterwards, available on our merchandise store. And lastly, look at this creative artist that's been able to do something with Captain Dividend, highlighting a photo booth for people to put their heads in and get a photo taken, highlighting the importance of carbon fee and dividend. Here's a couple of other opportunities you might not be aware of. We have QR codes that allow you to have people scan and go immediately to a website where they can sign in, or text to join. Most of our new materials have QR codes where people can automatically be joined with that action or with that issue by simply pulling out their phone, opening up their camera, and scanning it so that they have the ability from there to open a web page up. It's a great feature. Check out QR codes if you'd like to learn out more. We also have a wonderful tabling display that you can see here, available in 8.5 by 11 page printouts that you can put on a cardboard trifold board and have a 3-dimensional view for your engagement. You can see an example of somebody setting theirs up at home to practice, along with a sign-up sheet, some quarter sheet flyers, and a couple of these plastic placards that allow you to display a Spanish-speaking flyer, as well as one of our policy areas on the importance of building electrification. That's a great sample layout. So let's think about what as advanced supplies you want to include. You want to bring food and water to sustain your group and use food to maybe even entice people over to your table. One group had a CCL bowl of strawberries with a second bowl for the strawberry tops. People dropped by the table, picked up a strawberry, ate it while standing there, and then put the green leafy top in the second bowl. And while they were there, they were engaged in conversation. You could offer a cookie for anyone that takes the time to take action and contact Congress. You could borrow or buy a tent for shade or rain protection. Speaking of weather, if you're outside, you also want to think through having paperweights or some other creative way to hold down your handouts. I'm sure there's a lot of great ideas on how you could do that. A couple of other questions that you might be curious about. You can find out the newest materials that you have access to on CCL Community by going to community.citizensclimate.org, clicking on resources and training, and then from there, there's a drop-down menu that allows you to go to all resources. We feature some of the newest resources up on top. So right here, again, you can see a reminder to our new tabling handouts, our 6 Americas activity, our trifold board, and our About Us, Who We Are handouts. These are constantly rotating, and we'd love for you to be able to feature this with your outreach. We also have our Spanish language resources. If you simply search for Spanish or go to cclusa.org/Spanish, and a wonderful series of trainings on creative engaging tabling ideas if you want to search for that as well. There's images and resources and ideas for how to connect and mix things up. One of the things that we also debuted this year is a climate anxiety counseling booth, complete with instructional printouts. You can print this off at home and mount on your own foam or cardboard, or you can order it ahead of time and have it delivered on our signs.com store. We also have a guilt-free coupon. By taking action, you can make sure that you get a guilt-free pass and engage with your congressman or woman on an important climate issue. This is available. It's a very tongue-in-cheek ability for you to pass out at that climate anxiety counseling booth or separately, and there's a QR code as well for you to use. We have Inflation Reduction Act benefits handouts that talk about all of those benefits that come with the climate provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act for you to be able to highlight and educate your community on. And we have these new clean energy permitting reform handouts as well for this summer. We wanted to make sure to engage on this policy agenda area. And in addition to some helpful handouts in the same theme that we have with our other policy agenda areas, we also this month have had a series of challenging questions and answers about permitting reform explained. So, why do we need clean energy permitting reform? One simple answer is if we don't start building clean energy infrastructure faster, we could squander 80% of the potential climate pollution cuts from the Inflation Reduction Act. It currently takes an average of 4.5 years, 4.5 years to complete an environmental impact study for big energy projects, and a decade to build a new electrical transmission line. That's too slow if we're going to meet the emission reduction goals that we have, hence the need to find common ground for bipartisan comprehensive reform. Why is permitting reform especially important for electrical transmission lines, you might be asked? Well, one answer we recommend exploring is big solar and wind farms tend to be built out in rural areas where there's affordable and available land, and transmission lines are needed then to transport that clean electricity to population centers. We cite research by energy modelers like Princeton and their Zero project, which has identified electrical transmission lines as a key bottleneck in really being able to roll out the amount of clean energy we need. Another key question that you might be prepared for is, won't permitting reform also allow fossil fuel projects to get built faster? Well, we know that permitting reform will allow energy projects to get approved or denied more quickly, straight up. But we also know that 95% of energy projects waiting in the line to get built and 84% of the new energy capacity added in the USA on average the last 3 years is clean. And by that we mean solar, wind, and battery storage clean, with the rest of it being natural gas. So because clean energy is cheap and it's in high demand, a streamlined permitting process will largely benefit zero emission energy the most. We're already seeing that. Another question you want to make sure to think through ahead of time is the concern around why some environmental justice groups oppose permitting reform. We know that some groups are concerned that streamlining environmental impact reports will cut out communities' voices from the permitting process. We also know that many permitting reform advocates, including CCL, support measures that will improve early engagement and community involvement in these projects while streamlining the process overall. Getting those voices to the table as early as possible is absolutely front and center in CCL's priorities as well. So I think those are 4 key areas to explore and be ready to engage your members of public in your community with as you get out and talk about the most, or one of the most at least, important topics that Congress is tackling this year. So let's talk about post-tabling follow-up. After you table, you still got some things to do. First of all, have someone take responsibility for storing your tabling supplies. Second, post your photos on social media and tag your members of Congress or anyone else featured as an event organizer or an important local influencer. Third, let your organization know that you tabled. At CCL, we have our volunteers log their actions in our action tracker. If you don't know what that is, you can just search on CCL Community at the very top under Tools for Action Tracker. There should be a top link. And all you have to do is work with your team to make sure that you are getting credit for taking action with a grassroots outreach event. Fourth, but really this should be first in your mind, is following up immediately, not 2 days later or a week or at the end of the month, the very next day. Send a text to everyone who expressed interest in learning more about volunteering. Keep the text simple. The basic message is this: would you like to speak with one of our volunteers who can tell you more about volunteering with us? If they don't respond in 24 hours, send an email. And if they don't respond to text or email, call them and leave a voice message to, if necessary, to really help them feel invited and connected to the local group that they signed up for. At CCL, we discovered that if you follow up in this immediate and 3-pronged approach using any of those 3 areas, then 80% of the people you contact will be able to engage, and many will say yes to your invitation. So let's think for a moment about connecting with attendees and some ideas once you've got your materials and you're ready to go, how you can make sure to bond with those that you meet. In tabling, the first thing that you want to make sure is to connect with people on a personal level. Don't assume people are going to stop at your table. Have someone standing out in front in a ready posture. We don't want to just have our thumbs all on our phones in the back sitting behind the table. Your job is to engage people as they walk by with your friendly self. You might try some questions that would encourage people to stop and take a friendly, closer look. Here are some good one-liners that CCLers have found in the past to bring people over their table. Are you interested in helping address climate change? Are you concerned about climate change? In just 1 minute, you can do something about it. Take a moment to write your member of Congress on climate and get a fresh cookie. Want to learn about how you can get in touch with your local member of Congress on climate? From there, it's time to get a little vulnerable. What you want to do is share a little bit about yourself if they engage. Keep it short and sweet and cover 3 points. How you felt about climate change before getting involved with your organization, what you've been doing since getting involved, and what difference you've seen it making for you and the community. We call this your story of self. And an example could be something like this. Learning about climate change gave me the climate blues. Discovering CCL for me felt like a godsend. I learned that there's local friends that care about this issue too, and that action can be the antidote to my despair. I've now been with CCL for 14 years and I've never looked back. So let's take a moment to write down thoughts about your own story of self. And again, use the same framework of how you felt about this issue before getting involved with CCL, what you've been doing since you've been involved, and what difference it's making for you and your community. Keeping it short and sweet is simple so that you can also engage the passerby in their own story and find out about them. What do they care about? What brought them to the event that day? What do they like the world and what would they like it to look more like? After connecting with them, invite them to take action or learn and join more about your efforts. And to do that, you can offer an action. Once you find some common ground, it's time to invite them to take action. Maybe you'll be asking them to write Congress. If you do, mention the member of Congress by name. Most folks don't know who the members of Congress are, so you can help them feel more comfortable by mentioning your local members of Congress. You might also invite them to learn more about volunteering with your organization. Invite them to your upcoming social or opportunity to engage with your next monthly meeting or chapter activity. With anything you offer, pause, ask if they're interested to see if they'd like to share their contact information so you can follow up the next day to have a deeper conversation or more involvement. And that's where that QR code or that computer already signed in to cclusa.org/join comes in handy so they can sign up directly with your organization right there. And finally, here's a few things to avoid. We don't want you to get bogged down in trying to convince somebody about your issue or debating different solutions. If after a little bit of time it becomes clear that you're at loggerheads with each other, politely disengage so you can speak with others at the event. We also don't want to disparage other organizations. Instead, focus on what you like about your organization. At CCL, we like to remind ourselves that we are a solutions-focused organization, and we need a healthy ecosystem of organizations working in different ways that can increase our chances of success, right? We also want to make sure to not use dire warnings about your issue. If table visitors bring up climate doom, acknowledge the reality of the challenge that we face and tell them that's why you joined your organization, to work alongside others who are tackling this issue head on with similar concerns and a focus on solutions. If someone tries to engage you in a hot button kind of way, you can also politely remove yourself from the conversation and engage with them away from the table. Allow other volunteers to engage with new people while you gently try to disentangle yourself from the person wanting to argue with you. Those are some advanced formations. You probably won't run into it, and if you're concerned, you can always have somebody with you at the tabling event. So with that, we hope you found tonight's training useful and empowering. A reminder that we always appreciate you logging your trainings in our action tracker after you take them so that you can get credit. This one is how to table at an event if you search for that in the training. We always like to get a feel for how many people are taking each of our trainings each month, and that helps with our grant making and effective fundraising. And after tonight, if you have anything that you would like to follow up with, please feel free to reach out to me or post on our forums, cclusa.org/forums. We look forward to hearing what you're up to. Feel free to share on the forum your successes and have a wonderful night, everyone. Take care.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration.
Like what you hear?
Recommend us to your friends and make sure to give us a 5-star rating. It helps us show up on other listeners' feeds. Feel free to pass on any suggestions for future episodes in the comments as well. And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.